Should be all set.
Great. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to our discussion about Attica, the uprising, and what it means for us today. I am so incredibly excited for the conversation that we are going to have tonight. We have brought together an esteemed panel, folks who have lived through the Attica Uprising, historians who have award-winning pieces and documents on this, people who worked on the investigations into what happened, individuals who are leading our communities today, from incarceration to liberation. Truly an amazing panel that is with us tonight. I really am honored that all of you took the time to be with us. And I am really looking forward to the conversation that we're going to have. Now, I don't want to spend too much time talking because there are people much more capable that are on with us tonight that I think the community wants to hear from. But I did want to start off our conversation with reading the demands of the incarcerated men that were a part of the uprising almost 50 years ago to the day. So I'm gonna read this off, if you can just bear with me, and then we're gonna jump right into our program. So the demands were, 1, apply the New York State minimum wage law to all state institutions, stop slave labor. 2, allow all New York State prisoners to be politically active without intimidation or reprisals. 3, give us true religious freedom. 4, end all censorship of newspaper, magazines, letters, and other publications coming from the publisher. 3, allow all inmates at their own expense to communicate with anyone they please. 6, when an inmate reaches conditional release, give him a full release without parole. 7, cease administrative sentencing of inmates returned for parole violation. 8, institute realistic rehabilitation programs from all inmates according to their offense and personal needs. 9, educate all correctional officers to the needs of the inmates, i.e. understanding rather than punishment. 10, give us a healthy diet, stop feeding us so much pork, and give us some fresh fruit daily. 11, modernize the inmate educational system. 12, give us a doctor that will examine and treat all inmates that request treatment. 13, have an institutional delegation comprised of 1 inmate from each company authorized to speak to the institution administration concerning grievances. 14, give us less cell time and more recreational equipment and facilities. And 15, remove inside walls, making 1 open yard and no more segregation or punishment. Now you listen to all of those demands and you think about the reasons why these individuals thought it was necessary to advocate so fiercely for these reforms in our prison system. And if you look at the substance of this list, the unfortunate reality is that many of these things have not come to fruition. We are still fighting for these very demands to this day. And so when we talk about Attica and we talk about why, and we talk about the state's response with brutality, massacring incarcerated individuals, massacring correctional officers, and then a corrupt cover-up to not say what really happened on that day, this is as relevant to the criminal justice conversation as anything else that we are dealing with in the present day. And so I am really honored that we have with us individuals that are going to be able to speak to this in a really, really powerful way. And we are going to start off with an individual who was there. Arthur Bobby Harrison was 22 in September of 1971, but the torture which he endured and witnessed on September 13th as an incarcerated person in Attica will always remain a dark cloud over his life, as well as the fuel to be of service and good to his community. He has spent the last several decades working with at-risk youth in the Syracuse's African-American community in an award-winning boxing program. Mr. Harrison is the co-founder of the Faith Hope Community Center, a center that manages to serve youth who would not have a safe place to learn and grow were it not for their steadfast mentorship. At the Faith Hope Community Center, young people work on anger management and character development, understanding that, as Mr. Harrison succinctly reminds them, when you're wearing gloves, you can't hold a knife or a gun. Faith Hope is the only center that has a staff chef who voluntarily provides food when youngsters arrive hungry and ready to spar. And they are the only center that regularly receives informal, urgent referrals from school administrators and coaches who are concerned that a teen may be wandering off the right path. In 2019, he was honored for this work in the community by Syracuse University Chancellor Kent Sivrid, I hope I'm saying that correctly, with the Chancellor's Martin Luther King Jr. Unsung Hero Award. Bobby has 10 children, 43 grandchildren, and 8 great-grandchildren. And so without further ado, we are welcoming Bobby to this conversation. And I will say at the outset, this is for all of our panelists. This portion of the program, we're going to ask you to just speak for 5 minutes, just with some opening remarks on why this is important. And then once everyone gets through their opening remarks, I will be asking some more detailed questions, so you'll have an opportunity to get into detail. But Mr. Harrison, the floor is yours.
Well, it's an honor to be here to talk to you guys tonight about the painful day of September the 13th in Attica. It's something that would be with me for the rest of my life. You know, it's painful to talk about it. You know, like I spoke to Joe today about, I never had an opportunity to cry at that particular time about the things that occurred or the things that these young eyes seen at that time. I've heard about wars and stuff like that, and how inhumane that some humans can be towards other humans. I witnessed all of this on September the 13th in Attica. I seen men violated in so many ways. There's a young man by the name of Elliot Barkley out of Rochester, New York. I heard him crying out to the officers, telling them he was sorry. All he wanted to do was tell his version of what he thought was happening in prison that was wrong. But he was crying out because he didn't want to die. Later on, we found out the LD was shot to death. We didn't have guns, so someone who had guns had to kill him. So that tells you who killed him and stuff like that. That was painful because I talked to LD myself 2 days prior to the retaking of Attica. And I advised him that it wasn't a wise thing to keep showing your face on these media things, talking to people about what's going on here in the prison, because once they take the prison back, you're going to be one of the guys they come to get because you're out there. He said he just wanted people to hear another side of who LD was, because I guess in the street, we all have vices. So I'm not going to talk about what he did on the street, but he wanted to speak to his people or his community to know that he was well and he was trying to do the right thing, even though he might not do the right thing outside. He was doing the right thing inside prison for young brothers can hear him speaking about the hell we was going through at that time in Attica. And LD was only there for a small violation, and he would have been released within the next 60 to 90 days from what I was told. He never made it. It's painful. Like I said, I never had an opportunity to cry, but every time the reason I talked to Joe about speaking here today, because I want an opportunity to vent. because all of this pain and all this anger has been in me for all of these years. And because it seemed like everyone's forgot about what happened in this war. But that was war that was declared against human beings just because we didn't see things or didn't do some of the things the correct way. We were still human beings. But in no time in Attica after that retaking were we treated like human beings and stuff like that. Like I said, it's painful and I choke up. I'm a guy who, while being in prison, we try to be macho guys, tough guys, and all that kind of stuff. But you know, we're human and we have pain and stuff like that. And I've never been so afraid in my life of all of the carnage that was done to other human by other humans just because of the colors. Just like in California, the guys that wear red and the guys that wear blue, they kill each other because you was on different teams or whatever else like that. That's what occurred that day when they retook the prison. Everybody who had those green uniforms on, or green outfits on, they were the enemy, and we was being slaughtered for no other reason than we was prisoners, and they didn't think our lives mattered to anyone at that time. But like I said, I don't want to bore you guys, but it's painful to me to speak about it, and it hurts. Still, yet some 50 years later, it still hurts and it hurts bad. I only hope that this will make a difference in someone's life. That constantly I talk to the young people about prison and what it did to me and what I hurt my life in some ways, but the pain we take our family members through by coming in and visit us and stuff like that. You know, we think it's just about us being in prison, but when an individual's in prison, those who come and visit them, they're in prison also and stuff like that. I lost my mother in 2006, and I know by me going through the aggravation of going in and out these prisons and stuff, sent her to an early grave, and that's painful. Because the day of the retaking of Attica, my mother and my friend was outside, so I know the pain now that I look back at being an adult now, the fear that I was going through was nothing than what my mother had to be going through outside that wall. So I only, Mama, hear me now that I'm sorry, and I hope that something's done for you guys can help other people's family not to have to go through this kind of pain ever again, because that wasn't necessary. People were just crying out at to the little things that you like going to the store and the grocery store. Like you talk about the things that brothers, the demands that they wanted. There wasn't nothing that was major, man. The basic things: a roll of toilet paper, instead of one roll of toilet paper a month, maybe two or three. We just wanted to be treated like human beings and stuff like that. And then on top of that, at that particular time, there was a gentleman in California named George Jackson who was killed. And George Jackson was like a folk hero of prisons. But anyone who's been in prison knows that no one can slip a 9mm in an afro and slide it to you for you can go back through all those metal detectors and for no one to realize you have a gun in your body any type of place. So they know he was killed because he spoke up and spoke out and he wouldn't be broken. Matter of fact, George Jackson, the guy who I modeled myself after in prison, of being a prisoner like George Jackson, a guy that was a stand-up guy and was there to try to talk to young guys that were coming in those prison doors to let them know that this wasn't a rite of passage, because that's what so many of us young black men believe. We believe going to jail is a rite of passage, like some like young brothers like yourself that go to college. We didn't look at it like that. We look at that prison was that rite of passage, of meaning we was okay in the neighborhood and we was all right guys because we went to jail and made it back home and stuff like that. I don't want to like bore you guys and stuff like that. But like I said, it's painful for me to talk. But you're giving me an opportunity to vent, and that's what I want to do, is get some of this heavy baggage off of my back. And I only hope that for some of the brothers that are not here today, that's able to speak for themselves, that I'm speaking for them, not just for myself. All we wanted was to be treated like human beings. But still yet, as we talk today, because I had friends and their kids that's in prison, they're still being treated this way. So I only hope that someone hears my cry, because like I said, I never had the opportunity to cry as of yet, but I'm crying out now for help. Not only for myself or my family members that might be in prison, but anyone that's in prison. We're human beings, and all we ask for is to be treated like human beings. Mm. So I don't know if you guys want me to continue to talk, and I don't want to bore you with
let me assure you, Mr. Harrison, that there is not a single person listening, watching, or who will see the recording of this that is bored by what you said. Let me just thank you for sharing and talking and being vulnerable about such a painful time in your life. This is, it is a hard thing for us to hear. I can't imagine what it is to live it. And we are grateful that you have chosen to spend some time with us to share some of that. And we share the hope that that this will help change. And that's part of what we're going to talk about tonight, about how we can change the conditions and what revealing what truly happened at Attica might help us with today. So I thank you for sharing that. And we're going to come back to you later on in the program with some more questions. We're going to hear next from Dr. Heather Thompson, who, if you have not had the opportunity to read her book, Blood in the Water, the Attica Prison Uprising of 1971 and its legacy, let me tell you that this is one of the most extensive, exhaustive, detailed accounts of what happened, and truly, truly an amazing journey if you had the chance to read it. But let me dive into her bio before we have her speak for a little bit. And so it reads, Heather Ann Thompson is the Pulitzer Prize and Bancroft Prize winning author of Blood in the Water, the Attica Prison Uprising of 1971. The book will be made into a feature film by Sony Pictures, and Dr. Thompson is also the lead advisor on Stanley Nelson's forthcoming Showtime documentary on Attica. Dr. Thompson is also a public intellectual who writes extensively on the history of policing, prisons, and the current criminal justice system. On the policy front, Dr. Thompson served on the historic National Academy of Sciences Blue Ribbon Panel that studied the causes and consequences of mass incarceration in the United States. She currently serves on the Standing Committee on Law and Justice of the National Academies, as well as a myriad other policy and advisory boards, including the National States of Incarceration Project and the Ford Foundation's Art for Justice Fund. In 2018, Dr. Thompson co-founded the Carceral State Project with its documenting criminalization and confinement research initiative at the University of Michigan. She and her colleagues were awarded a multi-year grant to begin work on this research project, the first of its kind to document the experiences of being policed and incarcerated from the perspective of those who have experienced it most directly. Dr. Thompson was just awarded the Guggenheim Fellowship to write her next book on the MOVE bombing, which occurred on this day, May 13th in 1985. Dr. Thompson, we are honored to have you with us tonight, and the floor is yours when you're ready.
Thank you so much. Well, first I have to say I'm the one who's honored to be here and mostly to hear Mr. Harrison get to share your testimony with us. Thank you. And I know that that is extremely painful to share everything that you did. And I just want to share with everybody who is tuned in and listening that the reason we're all here and the reason why Senator Myrie has brought us here is because it is criminal that we don't all already know the story that Mr. Harrison is telling us. That story, and the story of the fact that 50 years ago this September, nearly 1,300 men stood together to demand to be treated as human beings in the Attica State Correctional Facility, not, as Mr. Harrison said, for crazy demands, but to be, you know, fed as human beings, to be given basic human rights. The fact that those people stood together and were gunned down and tortured for days and weeks, and that then that horrific moment was denied, covered up, was that trauma was literally swept under carpets, and that trauma was denied. That it was allowed to happen has everything to do with the fact that those records have been protected, and that those stories were not allowed to be told. And despite that, you know, the brothers like Mr. Harrison have told their stories. And despite that, the survivors have told their stories. And thank God, because that's how those stories have somehow stayed alive. And that's how, you know, by the grace of God, I was able to help tell those stories in the book that I was able to tell. But that's not enough. And that's why we're here. But because by not telling those stories, and by not telling the truth about what happened, we got it all wrong. We took a wrong turn after 1972. Somehow we got the idea that the folks, when they were serving their time, that they needed all kinds of extra punishments and longer sentences and even worse conditions. And we took that wrong turn in no small part because we got it all wrong what happened at Attica. So it mattered a lot that we didn't hear that story right. And we didn't hear that story right in part because the story was locked down. It was protected. Those records were protected. And I just want to say that here's something to think about as we continue our conversation tonight. That facility, the Attica State Correctional Facility, was a public facility. It still is a public facility. It is one that the state of New York taxpayers pay for. It is owned by everybody who lives in that state. And anything that happens there belongs to the people who live in that state. Everything that happens there, everything that goes on there. And that was true in 1971. It is true today. It is true every day. It is true every hour, every minute of every day. And so what happened to Mr. Harrison and what happened in 1971, it's not even just a matter of it happened and we have the right to know about it because we morally and ethically and as citizens need to know about it. And we need to honor the trauma and the stories that actually matter to us as a nation. But we actually we have a right to know about them because this is the story of a public institution that we fund and that we ostensibly trust to do right by us as citizens of this country and as taxpayers in the state of New York. So I just leave us to think about that the story that Mr. Harrison tells us about is not just a story. It is actually one that matters. And it's not just one that is ethically worth knowing. It is one that took us down a path from which we might never recover if we don't get that full story out. And I would love to hear everyone else weigh in on that. And thank you so much, Senator Myrie, for bringing us here, and Mr. Harrison for beginning this story with us.
Thank you so much, Dr. Thompson. I mean, your work, the talents that you've applied to this story has done wonders for people actually finding out what has truly happened, and not just from a movie or from sort of popular culture, but from the impacted individuals themselves. And we're very grateful that you dedicated a very significant part of your life to uncovering this story. And we'll get into later why such a significant event is still very little known to many New Yorkers, given the importance of what happened. And so we're going to next go to someone that I know very well, not just because of the work that he does for the community and in this space, but he's also a constituent, so he is my boss. I'm of course talking about Anthony Dixon, who is the Parole Preparation Project's Director of Community Engagement. For the past 3 decades, Anthony has helped secure the release of people serving long sentences in New York State. He has prepared people for their transitions home from prison and supported them in the months and years after their release. His critical advocacy work, and I know this because he's advocated in my office, includes pushing key policy reforms and building strategic partnerships. As an activist and organizer, Anthony is also a prominent national speaker on issues of long and life sentences. While in prison, Anthony received commendations for developing an anti-violence program, Breaking Free from Criminal Thinking, and a therapeutic anti-drug program called ASAP Life Areas. The former has had a 0% recidivism rate in the last 10 years. For his extraordinary efforts on behalf of marginalized groups, Anthony was issued the 2015 RISE Award by the community-minded organization. He is a recipient of the 2018 Freedom Fighter Award issued by Citizens Against Recidivism. The National Lawyers Guild website ranks him as an NLG scholar, and Mr. Dixon is a resident, as you've heard, of Brooklyn, the best senatorial district in the state of New York, District 20. Anthony, whenever you're ready, take it away.
Thank you for such an intro. Let me first say to my colleague Harris, it is so good to hear your voice and to know that you carry the voice of those that are not here today. And I really sense deep camaraderie with you. And it really resonates with me that you're still a lifer. And also, thank you also, Senator, for inviting me in this space, and the others that are on this panel with us today, and the enriching discussion that I hope will also help the hearers. So Attica occurred because people complained of racism, and that complaint fell on deaf ear. Attica is not a riot. Attica is an uprising. Attica was not a reign of terror or a display of a crime. Riots are empowered, someone said, spontaneously, and they express bitter emotion, and they tend to die out rapidly. Attica was planned months beforehand. It was already in the making. There's a timeline on before we get to the Attica uprising. And what Attica is, it's a passionate, desperate attempt to display desperation that incarcerated people inside of our prisons found themselves engulfed in. If Attica was a riot, I would quote King, riots are the language of the unheard. And I also want to quote a part of the Attica Manifesto that was actually sent out to, well, it was CC to like 36 people outside of the jail. And it says that the incident that has erupted here at Attica is not a result of bestiality of 2 people in prison, but of oppression that has been wrought by the racist administration network of the prison throughout the years. And I want to emphasize the following was really the preamble to the list of demands that was meant to go outside of the walls. And I consider this to go with what Harris had mentioned because it resonates with every plight that oppressed people find them in. And this is the cry of Attica, and it's the cry of so many people, not only in prison, but outside of the prison. And it has been the cry in this country for over 400 years. We are men. We are not beasts and do not intend to be beaten or driven as such. The entire prison populace has set forth to change forever. The ruthless brutalization and disregard for the lives of incarcerated people here and throughout the United States. What has happened here is but the sound before the fury of those who are oppressed.
Bobby, Eddie, how you doing?
Great.
Close quote.
Oh, wonderful. I won't keep you too long. I was just swinging by.
So I'm going to pass it now back over to you, Senator. I'm not going to take up a lot of time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. What a way to close your opening remarks. It's just so incredibly powerful. And I'm grateful to you for being with us tonight and for the work that you do in speaking for all of us about the grave injustice that happened at Attica, but that we see still today in our so-called correctional facilities. You know, it's not popular knowledge, but what happened at Attica, the reason why we don't know a lot about it was because there was an intentional cover-up. And you've heard that from Dr. Thompson and others, that there was a significant amount of corruption that led to this cover-up and the investigations that were called into question because of this cover-up. The investigations themselves had to be investigated. So we're talking about investigations of investigations because of this cover-up. And our next panelist, I don't know if there's anyone that has as much knowledge and insight into this process as Marty Mack, who served as the Executive Deputy Attorney General to Attorneys General Spitzer, Schneiderman, and Underwood. He also served as the Deputy Secretary to the Governor for Governors Spitzer and Patterson. Before his state service, he practiced law in Cortland, New York, where he also served as mayor, county attorney, and assistant district attorney. Mr. Mack led the Attorney General's litigation team to unseal the Myrie report, which he'll tell you what that is, which was a 1975 investigation into the investigation and prosecution of Attica-related crimes. 2 of its 3 volumes had been sealed for over 40 years. He presently resides in Cortland, New York, and is a partner at the firm of Mack and Walsh, where he focuses on municipal ethics law. Marty, whenever you're ready, take it away.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate it. It's great to be here. And I want to thank also Mr. Harrison for his remarks. It's really good to hear from him. And thank you, Dr. Thompson and Mr. Dixon. Now, I first became familiar with Attica, of course, by watching it on television. I was 18 and a freshman in college when Attica occurred, and I wrote a paper on Attica a month later. And one of the questions I asked in my writing was, would we ever really know what happened? And the fact is, here we are all these years later, and there's a lot we don't know, because the context of this is that so many of the records, from the grand jury to the Myrie report, parts of the McKay report, all this language that surrounds Attica, most of those records are sealed. What we do know is that on September 9th, when the uprising began, a prison guard was tragically killed. On 5 days later, when there was a retaking of the prison, what we do know is that 10 correction officers and staff were killed by police bullets, and that 29 inmates were killed by police bullets. 15 minutes, and you had that many deaths. Now, the prosecution for Attica went on for 5 years. It was endless, and it was a failure. But in 1975, in the spring, a Malcolm Bell, who was one of the assistant attorney generals, accused his superiors of covering up by not looking at cases against the troopers who did the shooting. And he said he had 6 dozen reckless endangerment cases ready to go. But he was denied that opportunity, he said, and he was squeezed out of his position and he resigned. And he wrote a letter to Governor Carey, 160-page letter to Governor Carey, telling him about what was going on at the prosecutor's office. So Carey, working with the attorney general, had Mr. Meyer appointed special attorney general to investigate the investigation, as you called it, and to look at what is going on, what is accurate about Mr. Bell's report and what is inaccurate. And he did that all in about 8 months. And then after the conclusions of Mr. Meyer's findings, he released his findings and his recommendations, which was volume 1. The next 5 years were spent in the courts, where the courts finally sealed volumes 2 and 3. So they've been sealed since 1975 when they were written. And several years ago, when I was at the Attorney General's office, we sought to unseal the Myrie report. And while the judge did allow us to unseal the record, he said you need to redact grand jury records. In New York State, the ability to unseal grand jury records is very limited. The statute is silent as to what the standard will be. It just says it's up to the court. The courts have developed a standard for that release, but it's very narrow. So we argued that, look, the federal courts are allowing the release of records based on their historical significance. In any case that is more significant than an Attica, it would be difficult to identify. So you need to look to the federal government. You've got the discretion. It'll meet the narrow threshold plus, but he didn't do that. He said, you need to redact grand jury material. And since the report of Meyer was an investigation into the grand jury process, most of it was grand jury material. So of 450 pages, we were able to release 52 pages, and all because of the secrecy requirements and the unwillingness of the court to allow us. We had even offered to redact the names in the report so that the public could at least see the events. There's a lot of material in those records that the world has yet to see. And I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I'll let you get on to the next part of your program.
Thank you so much, Marty. I think that's a really perfect transition. You know, this event that we have here tonight is due in part because of a bill that I worked on with some of the folks on this call here to unseal these grand jury records. And, you know, just a little bit of civic education before I kick it to the first question. What this bill would do is allow for the court to unseal grand jury records when there is when the subject of those records are of historical importance and significance. And as Marty said, it does not get more important and significant than what we saw at Attica in 1971. And this would give the court the ability to unseal those records, and it would create what we call in the law a presumption that after 50 years, that this type of record should be released. And that if you, as a judge, feel that they should not be released, you have to explain the reason why. And so what we believe is that in this 50th year since the uprisings at Attica, what better way for us to honor that uprising, for us to honor the demands that were made, but for also to uncover the truth of the brutality that happened on that day, than allowing for these records to be seen so we can actually talk about what happened at Attica and really start to see some change. And so my first question, and this is to the whole panel, anyone can jump in, is what do you think about what happened on that day and subsequently, how could that help spur reform into the current prison system, right? This is what the largest uprising of prisoners in our nation's history, a massacre of untold proportions, but we still don't know all the facts. What do you think we could learn from what really happened at Attica to help us push through some reforms today?
Well, let me jump in then. And the important thing about what we've learned at Attica is that it was a failure. And we need to better understand why it was a failure. And that's what the record would show us. But what we do know is that at the time, the unwillingness of the prosecutors to look at the police behavior in a serious manner was the biggest failure at all. They had even set that aside and first went after inmates. But the problem is after 5 years of this investigation, they had indicted 62 inmates and 1 police officer after 5 years. They didn't begin this investigation until weeks after the uprising ended. There were no police on the scene. The prison was not treated as a crime scene. And the tragic irony of all this is that it ended by Governor Carey when he closed the book on Attica by pardoning or commuting those who had been sentenced or were in prison, dismissing all the pending cases, and we ended up with nothing. And so the tragic irony is the one issue that held up a settlement of the dispute between the prisoners and the state was that the state would not grant the prisoners amnesty. They effectively were granted amnesty as well as the correction officers 5 years later, but it cost us the lives of 42 people. And this could have been done in a manner that the governor could have gone to the prison. He could have said, look, there won't be any reprisals. I can guarantee you that. I will execute my authority to ask the attorney general to prosecute and will supersede the attorney general. I can guarantee you that we will look at mitigating circumstances in your offenses. But we have to take it seriously. We have to look at the law. We have to look at criminal violations, but we will do it in a manner where you're not punished and where your needs are met.
It is also, I have to just say, it is also the case that even leaving aside the question of, the past and what might have happened and could have happened had those records been released, although that is essential and so tragic and it just heartbreaking to think of the trauma caused to the families of the prisoners and the guards alike, the corrections officers alike, because of that. But even aside from that, simply by releasing these records, by simply revealing the truth of what happens, it honors the stories that people have been saying were true. It acknowledges what they have said has happened. You're talking about people that have said something happened to them that for literally 4 decades, almost now 5 decades, officials said did not happen. For the prisoners, they were told that nothing but a fraternity hazing had happened to them. For corrections officers who had been killed, they were told nothing had happened particularly. This was a necessary evil, essentially, to rescue you. This was not excessive force. It was unfortunate that people had died, but this was regrettable, but it was unavoidable. This would honor the trauma that people endured. It would recognize what people has been saying actually happened to them. And why does that matter? Because it goes to the heart of what I said, what we got wrong. When I saw the telegrams that flooded into Attica after the morning of that retaking, when state officials stood outside of that prison and looked at reporters and said, the prisoners killed the hostages. The prisoners slashed the throats of the guards. The prisoners committed the trauma in that yard that day. That's not what happened. But because that's what the story was that went out, not only did then an orgy of terror get released against those prisoners when that retaking began and continued, but telegrams began flooding into that prison, calling for the death penalty, calling for everybody in that prison to be wiped out and annihilated. And that sentiment went on to change laws. And I can honestly tell you that it did. If you look at polling data, what Americans thought about the criminal justice system in 1970, and you can look almost immediately on the heels after the Attica event in 1972 and 3, when we start to pass the Rockefeller drug laws and we start to look at sentencing law, people actually cite Attica. They say, we're not going to let another Attica happen. We got to clamp down on these quote unquote animals. And it is in no small part because of the lies told about what happened. So when we release what really happened, we are actually we're setting the record straight. We're saying, you know what they said happened didn't happen. And what the folks inside said happened actually did happen. So it's honoring them, but it's also saying we got it so wrong, and that matters.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. You know, if I can, Mr. Harrison, direct this next question to you. People sometimes question why the brothers that were inside were willing to take such a risk, why they were willing to do something that people view as radical. And I'm wondering if you can talk about what the experience was like and why people may have felt that it was necessary to take the action and to do what folks did in order to get some of the demands that they were asking about. We're just working on unmuting you for a second.
Excuse me, were you speaking to me?
Yes.
Yes. Attica, like the brother said a little earlier, there was something that was going to happen anyway. You know, like I said, I was just back in prison off of the street about 90 days when the riot actually took place. So I was angry because I was in prison because I got shot by a police officer. So when they said, well, we're gonna, I guess, you know, have combat with the officers, I was for that because I wanted a sense of revenge. You know, when you're angry, that's what you want. But and I was a young guy at that time, full of energy and stuff like that. So I wanted my revenge, a way of getting back. And I thought that what this riot was going to represent for me was they have contact with those very same people who damaged my life at that time and put me in prison for something that I shouldn't have been in prison for. But once the riot itself took place, it wasn't about me no more. It was about survival. I think we had about 30 some odd guys there from Syracuse. And like I said, I was just off the street about 9 days, but I was the guy at that time who took care of my camp. I was the guy who went inside to the commissary room and brought back food for our guys could eat for the days that we would be out there. So I was that guy. And that all of those killings would have never taken place if Mr. Rockefeller had just treated us like human beings. He said, take my prison back. That was his very words. And that's what they did. They took his prison back and they had no concern about human life at that time. And so people try to cover things up, but this is something like similar to this thing that happened January 6th here in Washington, D.C. People are lying about that. But so we don't know when the truth is going to come out about that. But from Attica, we could see that the lies will always be uncovered. Some 50 years later, we're going to get the truth. We have people here on this panel. You know, I'm not of you guys' education level, but I got real big, strong common sense, and I can feel with people working together, we can straighten this thing about Attica out, and we can straighten some of this hellish stuff that's going on here today in our country that's not right. Lies are being told and people buy into lies because they don't think for themselves, their followers. So we that's here that have a little basic common sense, we try to teach other people about caring about one another. And let's not forget about those who are not able to take care of themselves. I'm not talking about physically handicapped. I'm talking about mentally enchained, mentally enslaved, because they took the chains off a lot of our legs and our hands, but they didn't take the chains off our brains. And there's still people who are afraid of those major decision makers and stuff like that. And people who don't want to jeopardize freedom. I'm over having true freedom. There's a sense of freedom, then there's true freedom. You know, we are people who look like me. I don't think we have experienced freedom here in this country in a long time. And I'm not a racist. If you look at me well, you look at my heritage. I know that somewhere in my family trait, there's a white folk. So whether by choice or force, I don't know, because I wasn't there. But see, I don't have any hate towards mankind. But I know we as a people of dark complexion, we haven't been treated fairly in this country. And I don't want to come on like it's a black and white thing. But in actuality, when it comes down to it, it is that, because we as people, we got to come together as one to make a difference here in this country. It's not about me no more. It's about my kids and their great grandkids that I have and stuff. I want them to have a better life than I have. I don't want them to think that they have to be a guy that's doing all this illegal stuff to be respected in the neighborhood or go to jail to get a rite of passage. I want them to be able to go, just like yourself, young brother, go to school and get an education and teach. Like the brother up above, he been in the school that I've been in, but he's been more prepared because I never got on that side of the fence. I thought it was all about education. I thought it was about physical attributes and being tough. But now, as I become a man and a grandfather and a great grandfather, I know it's more than that. And I know that we need a calamity of people coming together and helping each other and stuff like that. I myself, now that I look back here in Onondaga County, there was about maybe 100 murders in the last 2 decades here in Onondaga County, little Onondaga County, that was come directly from the lies that were told on me. Because when I came out of Attica in 73, I was a little different. And I was angry, as the anger comes out now when I speak about, as we talk about Attica, that the pain that I seen other men go through, the pain that they made me go through, made me feel less than a man, treated me like a piece of shit, a dog, an animal, not a human being, get hurt. And I tried to come home to my community and talk to young brothers about, man, jail ain't the place to go at. I done been there. I done seen it from the real side now. That's not where we got to go at to become men. And by me trying to tell the truth in my community, I became the enemy of those in charge, folk in power, those who write the bills, like we're talking about doing the right bill now, down in changing things and making things happen. There's people who don't want things to change because in certain people's head, when they see people like me, they still see slaves. People that's less than human. In 2021, this shouldn't be going on. What's going on now, right here today, where they're writing laws where people can't vote no more. They know how people like us feel about being patient when they're going to and doing this paperwork. We don't like doing that stuff. That's just who we are as people, especially black men. So they make it for we won't want to vote. But it's the joke is not going to be on us on the last end this end, because I know one thing about us as a people. When you make us upset, that makes it more involved, and we want to get involved. So just like we did this last election, we're going to get involved again because we know now that you're taking us to be fools and stuff like that. And all we wanted to be, what's that basketball coach that said, why do a country that we do so much for treat us so bad? That's what it is. We just want to be respected as people, human beings, man, and that's what it all comes down. And I know it sounds a little awful. This guy's fucking crazy. No, I'm not crazy. I'm hurt. I'm in pain. This is Attica again, and this is what's coming out of me now. Attica, the pain. I'm not being able to fight back at that particular time. Like I said, I never cried. I feel that pain now. And if you brothers can make a difference, what you can do, man, because it's needed, because our kids are dying in mass numbers, man, because they bought into all this bullshit talking about gangs and all that stuff, because everybody want to belong to something.
Yep.
Everybody want that little 30 seconds of respect. We need your help, man. See, I'm crying out for those who don't know what's in front of them. I've lived 73 years and I was told I wouldn't live to be past 20. So I done beat it out of 52 years. So I have that wisdom of saying, I know there's a better way. Then I'm here today talking to people such as you guys, man, to help us make a difference. There's young brothers out there who need your help, man. Keep trying and keep fighting. Anything I can do to help, to open up any kind of way of doing for these young folk. White, black, red, green, it's not about color with me. It's about, the only race matter to me is the human race. That's us guys right here. So it's up to us to try to make a difference, man.
Let me just say that, one, I don't believe you that you're 73 years old, because you look good.
Thank you.
But secondly, you know, I could sit here and listen to you all night, to be honest, because there, as the kids would say, it's facts, a lot of facts that you are giving us. And again, I want to thank you for sharing what is so painful, and being able to talk through that. You know, we just really appreciate it. And that's what we're about. And that's what you're helping to do, is to help turn that pain into progress, help us to use what has happened to help the generation today, kids today, which leads me to my next question to Mr. Dixon, about why do you think it's important for people to know about what happened in Attica, and for people to know the truth? What do you think, you know, how can that help with the movement today?
All right, excellent question. I think that Attica, first let me say that prisons, period, are monuments of society's failures. And they are places where we put problems without solving them. I think that Attica specifically is a moment that we can reflect on and conscious raise. And when I look at the list of demand, they are very similar to the demands that I read today that are coming from across the nations, from other prisons. They are very similar to demands that precipitated Attica, and that in fact inspired Attica demands. So this is an old echo type of situation. Look at some of the things that the demand asks for. It looked for things like rehabilitation. They actually compared rehabilitation that was in there during their time to pouring water on a drowning man. The programs we got today are inadequate. They looked at the medical staff as being totally unequipped to deal with their situation. Today in prison, the 32 years that I went in there, I could tell you what pills they would give you. We call them all-purpose pills. No matter what kind of situation you get, especially in Green Haven, is notorious for it. Attica is notorious for it. It's an all-purpose pill. One time there was a flu going around, and I remember they had a medication that said only for prisons. They wanted to have unfiltered access to books, to newspapers. They wanted to raise their conscience. The parole board, they had quotas on how much they was releasing a year, much like today. They had inadequate voting conditions, much like today. They could easily extend visits beyond 3 o'clock or 2 o'clock and give you night visits for individuals that got to work from 9 to 5 on the weekends. But they won't. So I'm happy to say that you're one of the senators that brought us to the finish line on the halt, solitary confinement. That was one of their demands, right? So they also wanted the opportunity to assemble peacefully. Well, today they gave us 6 people to a group, right? And they won't let us go beyond that because they recognize that we get together, we can possibly cause change. They looked at free labor. They was actually getting paid an average of 40 cents a day. The same as today. I mean, a lot of things that we look at that was the recipe for Attica Uprising is in fact still in place today. The fact that people wanted to work to support their family means that they wanted to give back. Minimum wage laws, as mentioned, one of the things they wanted was to go from block to block. That came about as a result, like what we got today. We have what is called the inmate liaison committee, where the individual was able to go from one block to another. That was brought about by the Attica Uprising. The grievance committee, that was brought about by the Attica Uprising. However, FRP2, however, there's been rollbacks and things put in place. If you file a grievance in some facilities, the police will get you back, right? And in some instances, they will force you to sign off on it. I don't know if you are aware, but when I knew I was going to have this discussion, I got in retro mode. And I went back to what we used to say inside. They taken back everything they gave us. Here is the docs report on grievances, right? 27,000 grievances for 2019, 27,000 inside of max facilities. That's a high number. Who's at the top of the number? Attica is number 1. Auburn, 2. Bedford, Hills, 3. Coxsackie and Clinton, 4th and 5th. Those are those grievances are monitors of discontent, of something going wrong. What is the 3 major areas for those grievances? Well, this is docs themselves reporting that the highest category is in the facility operation, 27%. Health is second, and programmed services is third. That's by DOC's own admission. Now, when we think about like the parole board, I'm in the weeds with that, as you know. We have a bill that actually goes with the Attica Manifesto. They believe that if you was in prison for more than 10 or 15 years, you belong in a mental institution. Our bill would make that a reality, that people are not in there just dying. The bill that we got right now that is at almost the finishing line with some more push, as you know. But the Attica conscious individual, and I thought about this because I was around some individuals that was in the Black Panther. One Black Panther could be multiplied in consciousness, not in name, but in consciousness 10,000 times. The Attica Uprising, the recipe for the Attica Uprisings were individuals who was either civil rights or activists was put in prison, or Black Panther members, right? And they infected the New York prison system. Most of the individuals that was the organizers behind it, because individuals got down with it that said, man, it just happened. They didn't know it was already organized. But the ones that that was the organizers were themselves clerks. They was the gatekeepers, the ones who had the most to lose, but was the most conscientious. And so that whole recipe is there for it to happen. But I believe too that individuals like you and the things that we're doing right now is crucial at this day and hour.
Thank you. Just powerful stuff. Marty, if you know, we've been sort of throwing around grand jury and secrecy, and you know, for those of us who kind of live in this space, those things are easy to understand. But I don't think most of the public understands the difference between a grand jury and a regular trial, what happens pre-trial, appellate review, investigation. So I'm hoping, can you talk to us about the concept of a grand jury, why there is even secrecy around those proceedings, and why it's important that we build in exceptions like the one that we're fighting for now? You're muted, Marty. You're muted.
The grand jury concept traveled with the colonists from England into the United States. It was part of the colonial law. But the idea of the grand jury originally was to protect the individual from the state, that there would be a group of citizens gathering before somebody was indicted. An indictment is an official charge of a felony brought by the state. Before that could happen, a group of citizens would meet, hear the evidence, and the standard of a grand jury is whether or not there is reasonable cause to believe a crime has been committed. It's not like beyond a reasonable doubt when you get to a trial. So these citizens then would say yes or no. If they said yes, they would deliver an indictment to the court. The court would order the arrest of the individual would come into court. So a grand jury is where cases originate. But the truth is the United States may now be the only country in the world that uses the grand jury system. England no longer does. A lot of that has to do with issues of transparency, because one of the golden rules of grand jury is secrecy for all sorts of reasons. It certainly makes sense that when a grand jury is going on, you don't want a reporter sitting in the room and running out and saying what happened, who said what. It might intimidate or it might influence other witnesses coming into the grand jury. The problem, though, in this kind of case like Attica, and the cases we see around the country today, where the state is the actor, the state is the court, the state is the prosecutor. The question is the grand jury today protecting the citizen from the state, or is it protecting the state from consequences? Because that's what happened at Attica. They avoided consequences right from the beginning, and they desired to do so. So your legislation is really an effort to create at least one clear-cut path to transparency. It's not changing anything really other than adding something, because the statute is void of any possible exemptions to the secrecy rule, just up to the court. So that's why the court stepped in and created some narrow guidelines of what one must prove. And grand jury records have been released on cases a lot less significant than Attica. So the whole point is we're not changing tradition by opening the doors. The federal courts were doing it. They've changed it a little bit right now because they say, you know, we should be doing it by law, statute, rather than by court rule. So that may happen at the federal level, but it's turning on its, the grand jury has turned on its head from its original purposes. So it's time for a review.
Thank you. And that's very helpful, just for folks to have the context. And I think that last piece is also really significant in that, you know, we've seen grand jury proceeding testimony been released for things a lot less consequential than what we saw at Attica. Dr. Thompson, I'm hoping you can talk to, you know, you do a lot of work and you're doing a lot of work about mass incarceration and the criminal legal system and instances of state violence in other places. And I'm wondering if you can tie in how you feel Attica fits into this larger conversation about how we treat people in prison and just the larger movement for justice.
Yeah, I think, I mean, at the risk of sounding repetitive, I just think that when we have a system where when very traumatic events happen, whether intentionally or accidentally, let's just leave aside for a moment why they happen, when they happen, and people have suffered tremendous harm, and particularly people who do not have a lot of power in society, when what has happened to them gets denied, and when the record of what happens to them can be easily and actively shut away by those that have power, the consequences of that are not just felt by the victims of that harm. What I don't think that we fully understand is that the consequences of that are actually felt over the very long term by the society as a whole. And I can give you some very concrete examples of that. When we think, for example, about the fact that in Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1921, there used to be an incredibly vibrant and rich area known as Black Wall Street. And in Black Wall Street, there was a vibrant Black community where there was, stores and schools and a vibrant, self-sufficient, economically Black community. And in 1921, that community was utterly wiped out by white violence. But not only was that event denied by the white townspeople of the time and officials, but it was actively covered up. But the consequences of that cover up and the denial was not just that the people in that town had that trauma denied. It was that an entire generation and generations thereafter did not know that Black Wall Street ever existed, did not know that there had been a repository of Black success and wealth that was not then allowed to be passed forward generationally, that there were Black homes that were not allowed to be handed down to subsequent generations of Black children, and was not allowed to be then translated into college educations. And I mean, so there was a whole repository of knowledge that never was then translated generationally throughout American history from that traumatic not telling of what had actually happened. And so I think that the reason why we need to have this transparency is again, for the immediate trauma of the victims of these events, but also because we as a nation, when we don't know what happened historically, and we only take the word for it of people who get to tell us what happened because they have power, because they have prestige, because they have white privilege, then we literally get it wrong. And getting it wrong has consequences for our nation, for racial justice, for economic justice, and frankly, for our ability to move forward as a country, and the things that Mr. Harrison is telling us about, to have a country where we can actually do right by all of our children, not just some of them. Where we can actually have a country where when we say we've got equal justice under the law, that it actually means something. Where when people do time, that it's not gratuitous punishment, and so forth and so on.
Thank you so much for that, and really drawing the parallels to Black Wall Street, I think brings it home on how important it is that the real story get out. We are moving to the close of the program, and so I would offer our panelists, a brief minute or two to say anything if you'd like as closing remarks, as we look to wrap this up. And again, thank you to everyone that has stayed with us. Mr. Harrison, I'd give you the opportunity to what you'd like us to walk out of this conversation with as we close the program. And I think Joe will just help you unmute because we can't hear you.
Hello? Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Yes.
What I would hope that we could get from this thing tonight is that we can make a difference if people just decide to work together. And, you know, like history repeats itself. Like now everybody's talking about the big lie, and the big lie was told about Attica. But it all comes in about what's going on now today too. This is the big lie once again. We've seen things covered up before. They're trying to do the same thing again with this election stuff. So this has happened before. And the only way we're going to change these things is people got to mobilize and organize, like the brother up top here said before. We as a people, man, we can't quit the fight. We got to keep going forth, and we need that love of all people. When I can see red, black, green, all colorings. People got to come together. It's those who don't want us to come together, because that takes away from what they got. So we've got to go forward with trying to bring that old love thing back, I guess, but bring peace and harmony amongst people and stuff like that. And that's up to you guys, man. And anything I can do to help, let me know.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you for everything that you've said and imparted with us tonight. It will make a difference. Mr. Dixon, anything to close?
Right. I think that it's incumbent upon us in this space to conscious raise, but also there are many advocates, but there are not enough organizers and activists. And I want to challenge people in that space to cross on over. We can end the prisons that we have today, and we can reimagine something far better than what is here now. Our prisons can be turned into college and vocational schools. And whilst we're at it, we can think about preventative measures by addressing some of the causes of crime that should be addressed. We can make a better America if we stop capitalizing on other people's plight and at their expense. That would be it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dixon. Mr. Mack.
Yeah, I think the final message of Attica is that you have to be able to hold people accountable, because that accountability not only heals those who are hurt, it informs those who are still learning how to live their lives. So it's both looking back and looking forward. Citizens today, you know, who encounter the criminal justice system, they would be aided by a more transparent system. So anything that aids to the transparency of the criminal justice system, there is no need to do it in a locked door, behind locked doors. It should be open, and there should be more avenues to access so that we can avoid such consequences in the future.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And Dr. Thompson to close.
Well, just to close, September this year is the 50th anniversary, and I think it gives us all an opportunity to reflect on and support everything that has just been said, to call once and for all for the opening of these records so that we can finally tell this full history, reconcile with it, reckon with it, so that we can do it differently in the future, because it matters to all of us. We can't keep doing what we're doing. We lock up more people than any other country on the globe, and we cause a whole lot of trauma doing so. And so we got to do it differently. And the path to doing it differently will be to fully reckon with what we did wrong in the past. And so history is not just about the facts. It's about really reconciling with it so that we can move forward. So I really appreciate the effort to open these records. Let's do it.
Thank you so much. And let me again express how thankful I am to our entire panel. I don't know about the folks who were listening and watching, but this was just an incredibly powerful event. to hear the testimony, the realness, the rawness, the expertise. I am really inspired for us to push this and to get it across the finish line. For those of you who are following at home, the bill is S316, S316. And so please go read it for yourself. It's pretty straightforward, but we're going to be pushing. We don't have that much time left in this session. And so, you know, I usually say on these advocacy type calls, call your state senator. If you're my person, if you're my constituent, you can call me, but do know that I'm supportive of my own bill. And so we might need you to make some phone calls to some other senators, some other assembly people, so that we can move this bill. Our dream is to be able to have this for the 50th anniversary this September. And I believe that we can do it and we can make it happen. I've been so moved by everything what we heard today. And Mr. Harrison, again, we thank you for being with us and for sharing your story because it was very moving and inspiring. So to the panel, thank you, thank you, thank you. To my staff that helped make this happen, Anderson, Adeline, Matt, Atira, everybody, Yvonne, to the Senate Tech folk, Lisa, who made all this look good while we were talking, and to all of you who have joined us tonight. We appreciate you. Thank you very much, and let's get it done.